The first time you watch Attack on Titan, certain deaths make you sad. But the second time, when you know the full story, those same deaths become absolutely unbearable. The first time you watch episode 1, you see a mother get eaten by the smiling Titan. It is tragic, but it seems like random bad luck. She was trapped under the rubble. The Titan found her, and Hange was too afraid to fight it. A horrible accident that set the entire story in motion. But on a rewatch, knowing what the final episode reveals, this scene becomes something far worse. Eren himself from the future was the one who directed the smiling Titan toward his own mother. He manipulated the Titan to ignore Bertholdt and walk straight to Carla instead. He needed his younger self to witness this trauma so that his hatred for Titans would be strong enough to drive him down the path that led to the rumbling. Every single time Eren screams about avenging his mother throughout the entire series on a rewatch, you know that he was the one who took her away, a son who sacrificed his own mother to fuel the rage he needed to destroy the world. And the worst part is that Carla used her final seconds trying to hold back her screams so that her children would keep running and not look back. She died protecting the boy who sent the Titan to kill her. Sasha. The first time Sasha dies, it feels sudden and unfair. She survived every major battle in the series, and then a single bullet takes her down on the airship ride home. Everyone is devastated. But what makes this scene unbearable on a rewatch is Eren's reaction. The first time you watch it, Eren laughing seems cold and heartless, like he has completely lost his humanity. But on a rewatch, you understand what is actually happening. Eren already saw this exact moment 3 years earlier when he kissed Historia's hand and received visions of the future. He already knew Sasha was going to die. He already knew her last word when he asks his friends what she said before dying. He is not asking because he wants to know. He is asking because he is desperately checking whether the future can still be changed. When the answer matches exactly what he already saw, he laughs because he realizes that nothing can be altered. His fate and everyone else's is sealed. That laugh is not cruelty. It is the sound of a 19-year-old boy realizing he is trapped in a future he cannot escape. He spent 3 years knowing his friend was going to die and could do absolutely nothing to save her. Marco. The first time you watch season 1, Marco is found dead after the Battle of Trost. Half of his body is missing and Jean is completely shattered by it. It seems like just another casualty of war. A good soldier who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But on a rewatch, knowing what the later seasons reveal, this death becomes one of the most disturbing in the entire series. Marco accidentally overheard Reiner and Bertholdt discussing their true identities as enemy soldiers. To protect their secret, Reiner physically restrained Marco and ordered Annie to remove his ODM gear, leaving him completely defenseless in the middle of a Titan-infested battlefield. His own friends, the people he trained with, ate with, and trusted with his life, deliberately stripped him of his only means of survival and left him there to be eaten alive. And the worst part is that Reiner's guilt over this moment was so overwhelming that his mind literally split into 2 separate personalities just to cope with what he had done. Every single time Reiner acts friendly toward the scouts after this point, on a rewatch, you know he is the reason Marco is dead. And Jean, who turned his entire life around because of Marco's death, never found out the full truth until years later. Mike. The first time Mike dies in season 2, he seems like a minor character who gets killed off quickly. Most fans barely remember his name. But on a rewatch, knowing the full scope of the story, his death becomes far more significant. Mike was officially the second strongest soldier in all of humanity, right behind Levi. He had an incredible sense of smell that could detect Titans from miles away and even distinguish individual people by their scent. If he had survived, he could have smelled something wrong with the tainted wine that Zeke used to secretly turn Eldian soldiers into Titans during season 4. He could have exposed the entire plan before the rumbling ever happened. Zeke killed him casually in his very first appearance on the island, not even understanding how important Mike actually was. Humanity's second strongest warrior, a man who could have changed the entire course of the war, died screaming in the very first encounter with the Beast Titan, and nobody in the story ever truly acknowledged what they lost that day. Colt. The first time you watch this scene, it happens so fast that most fans barely register it. Zeke is about to scream to activate his spinal fluid and turn every contaminated Eldian into a Titan. Colt is standing right next to his little brother Falco, who accidentally drank the tainted wine. On a rewatch, knowing exactly what is about to happen, this scene becomes one of the most selfless acts in the entire series. Colt runs towards Zeke, begging him not to scream, knowing that his brother will transform. When Zeke screams anyway, Colt has a clear window to run away and save himself. He is far enough from Falco to escape the transformation radius, but instead of running, he wraps his arms around his little brother and holds him as tight as he can, knowing that the transformation will burn him alive. He chose to die hugging his brother rather than live without him, and the most painful part is that it was completely pointless. His sacrifice did not save Falco. It did not stop the transformation. Colt died for nothing except to make sure his little brother did not have to become a monster alone. On a rewatch, knowing that Falco survives and eventually gains the power of flight, Colt never got to see what his brother became. Porco. The first time Porco dies, it feels like a quick battlefield decision. He gets overwhelmed by Titans and Falco, now transformed, eats him, inheriting the jaw type. It seems rushed and almost random, but on a rewatch, this death mirrors something incredibly painful from the very beginning of the story. Years earlier, Porco's older brother Marcel sacrificed himself to save Reiner from being eaten by a Titan during their first mission. Marcel pushed Reiner out of the way and was devoured instead. Porco spent his entire life resenting Reiner for surviving at his brother's expense, never understanding why Marcel chose to save someone he considered weaker. But in his final moment, Porco finally understood. When he saw Falco, who had just been turned into a mindless Titan through no fault of his own, Porco made the exact same choice his brother did. He let himself be eaten so that Falco could inherit his power and return to being human. The brother who spent years hating his sibling's sacrifice ended up making the exact same one. On a rewatch, every scene where Porco complains about Marcel's death becomes unbearable because, he will eventually repeat it. Hange, it is a heroic sacrifice. Sad, but noble. They chose to stay behind so their friends could escape on the flying boat. But on a rewatch, two hidden details make this scene far more painful. First, the very first thing Hange ever said to Levi when they met was that they had been watching him fight. Years later, after Hange dies, Levi sits alone and whispers that he hopes Hange keeps watching over them from wherever they are now. Their entire relationship began with watching and ended with watching, a perfect circle that only becomes visible on a second viewing. Second, Levi, the most cynical soldier alive, had never once told anyone to dedicate their heart throughout the entire series. He found those words meaningless after watching so many soldiers die repeating them. But right before Hange walked out to face certain death, Levi said it for the first and only time in the show, and Hange smiled. Because even in that final moment, they noticed that the man who rejected those words his entire life finally said them as his way of saying goodbye. Kenny. The first time Kenny dies, he seems like a villain getting what he deserved. He spent his whole arc fighting against the Scouts and trying to steal the founding Titan for himself. But on a rewatch, his final moments reveal something completely different about his character. Kenny was dying from burns after Rod Rice transformed into his massive Titan. He was holding the last remaining Titan serum in his hand. He could have injected himself, transformed into a Titan, eaten a shifter, and survived. Instead, he handed the serum to Levi, the nephew he had abandoned years ago on the streets of the underground city. The man who seemed like a selfish criminal his entire life made his final act one of love. And in his last moments, he simply reflected on how everyone he ever met was a slave to something, whether it was alcohol, faith, family, or the king they followed. On a first watch, that sounds like random philosophy from a dying man. On a rewatch, you realize he was talking about himself. Kenny spent his whole life chasing power because he was a slave to the idea that strength was the only thing that mattered. And in the end, the only truly powerful thing he ever did was give that strength away to someone he loved. Grisha. The first time you see Grisha steal the founding Titan from the Rice family, he looks like a man on a desperate mission willing to do anything for his cause. He attacks Frida, overpowers her, eats her, and then kills the rest of the family. It is horrifying, but it seems like his own choice driven by his past in Marley and his desire to free the Eldian people. But on a rewatch, knowing what the Paths episodes reveal, this scene becomes pure psychological torture. Grisha did not want to do any of it. He was standing in that chapel crying, ready to abandon his mission entirely, but future Eren was standing right behind him, invisible to everyone else, manipulating his father's memories and emotions, pushing him forward step by step. Grisha was being controlled by his own unborn son from the future, forced to commit mass murder against his will so that the chain of events leading to the rumbling could begin. Every tear on Grisha's face in that scene is real, and the cruelest detail of all is that after being forced to do the most horrifying thing imaginable, Grisha went home and passed his Titans down to Eren, who had just used him as a puppet. He handed the weapon to his own puppeteer. These are the deaths that change meaning completely when you already know the ending. Attack on Titan is one of the few stories where a rewatch does not just add context, it adds pain.